Hey, everybody, welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live again from Washington, D.C. And we have a really good show for you today. We got somebody back. We had about a week or so. Jim Webb, who is a former Marine, is now currently a journalist, actually has been for a while, and also is a policy advisor. As we're going to tap into a little bit of that today because he's been advising a number of people and candidates and campaigns, some very big ones. Which we'll let him talk about there. But no, it's at the top level here. And one of the things we're going to tap in today is kind of your combination of the journalist that you've been, where you kind of you kind of can touch into the heartbeat of America, so to speak, and you know what people are thinking, and as the policy advisor and as the Marine. So it's kind of pulls them all together here, because what we're going to look at today specifically is how the veteran vote has affected past elections and how it could actually tip this one. And as we're going to talk about here in a second, one the one from 2016 was like almost an earthquake because it kind of came out of nowhere and surprised a lot of people. But people like you that were paying attention, it wasn't that much of a surprise.
Not at all, Dan. Not at all. If you look at the trends over really going back to 2000, as ironic as it is, George Bush, he ran on a non-interventionist type of platform. He was reacting to the actions in Yugoslavia of Bill Clinton. They weren't really popular. No one wanted to be the world's policeman. And then September 11th, 2001 really changed that.
Yeah.
But you saw the results, of a bad policy choice and of war as early as 2004, and the pinnacle was in 2016 with the election of Trump.
Yeah, so it had been building up since that time, and in fact, it took a lot of people by surprise. Actually, shocked a lot of people because heading into that 2016 election, Trump had kind of burst onto the scene and made a big splash because he was a non-politician, et cetera. But still, the conventional wisdom said, at the end of the day, it's going to be the professionals that are going to prevail. And Clinton had, by one estimate, I remember seeing somewhere between a 90 and 95% probability of win.
Right.
And as you'll see on this clip here, just before the election, there was a pretty good consensus that she was going to win.
In the Battleground States, which are the key states for determining who's going to win the ultimate presidency, we're seeing Hillary Clinton continue to lead. She has a slight lead. Donald Trump is within striking distance, but Hillary Clinton continues to have a strong lead in the Battleground States, places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, Virginia. And if she does well enough in those states, she will be the next president.
And of course, as we mentioned earlier in that NBC News poll, Hillary Clinton is trailing Donald Trump when it comes to military voters.
So military support, which I guess will be key tonight, is behind Donald Trump? Talu?
That's what we're seeing in this specific poll. Donald Trump has, from the beginning of his campaign and even before he ran for president, spent a lot of time talking about the veterans and how they're treated after they come home. He said that in some cases he believes undocumented immigrants are treated better than the veterans.
They had a little bit of a warning there that, look, that was a pretty big difference between it.
Right.
But, that hadn't actually tipped any of the previous elections because they hadn't been that close. So that you didn't really see the impact of it. But I think that people really underestimated just how tired the veteran community, and especially the family members of the veteran community, were sick and tired of their family members getting blown up, killed, or coming back with missing limbs or PTSD and all that kind of stuff. And I think that it really did take people by surprise.
Absolutely. And but if you peel back the data a little bit here, it's really not that much of a surprise. As far back as 2008 with Ron Paul, he had the same kind of support from active duty military. And it's really tricky to track, say, the donations coming in from veterans because you'd have to self-identify. It's a little easier to track that military-wise from the active duty component in particular. And in 2008, in the as far as the primaries went, because we all know Ron Paul didn't end up running for president, but he had more donations from active duty military than any other candidate by a long margin during that primary process. You roll this forward. How did Obama get elected? Big argument that it was, surrounding his desire to withdraw from Iraq. He lost a lot of support in his reelection campaign, and that coincides directly with the involvement in Libya and Syria. And if you look at the particular counties, they identified the battleground states: Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Western Pennsylvania. And those were the same areas where you had these 12 to 15 so-called pivot counties, which went Obama, Obama, Trump during those 3 election cycles. On top of those counties, those are also, not all of them are the highest casualty counties. A lot of them are, but virtually all of them are adjacent to it. So you have a reflection of the ballot box, in essence, of the people who have been fighting America's wars for generations. This is demographically, these counties and across the country, you have 14% of the population, incurring more than 20% of the overall losses on the battlefield. And that's unique to the GWAT, but it's a common theme, going back to at least the Korean War, where you have a citizen soldier model. These are the people who step up, they fight, and then they go back home. And
yeah, and and I think that Trump especially was able to tap into that. I think that a lot of criticism he gets for a lot of different things. Some of it's quite justified, but man, you cannot ding the guy for his ability to recognize where the fault lines are and where the emotions are and where people are. And then, as we saw in the way this election came after this 90% probability of him losing, instead, this happened.
It is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Thank you. We will also finally take care of our great veterans. We've been so loyal, and I've gotten to know so many over this 18-month journey. The time I've spent with them during this campaign has been among my greatest honors. Our veterans are incredible people. We will embark upon a project of national growth and renewal. I will harness the creative talents of our people, and we will call upon the best and brightest to leverage their tremendous talent for the benefit of all. It's going to happen.
And certainly he maintained a lot of that support all the way through. But I think that really, well, there's a report that came out about a year later, actually, that said when we did a study of what tipped it for President Trump over Hillary Clinton, everybody had all these theories when it first came out, but they hadn't had the data. When they started checking out the data, however, they found out that the relationships between the high military casualty counties and the people who voted for Trump over Clinton in those critical battleground states, it was just enough to tip it over. Without which, if they had been, as I understand from reading this study, if they had been just like the same percentages as the other counties in the state, Hillary Clinton would have been president, not Trump. But because the people closest to the fighting and the closest to the paying the cost for it, they were tired of war. And of course, Clinton was running on, let's go get everybody. Let's keep on doing all this military engagements. We're going to lead with the military, all this Trump. And Trump was saying no more stupid wars or whatever. And for the people that pay the consequence for those policy ideas, they went in the direction of no more stupid wars. And I'll just be honest, I voted for him. And that was one of the big reasons why I did in 2016, was because I was sick and tired of having fought in all these wars and seen people die and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, at least somebody's going to maybe keep us out of any more of them. So the big question is, that's what happened in 2016. What's going to happen now, do you think, in 2024 when it comes up to the next one? And will any of these presidential candidates try to tap into this? Or are they all going to be saying, let's go kill them all and let's go fight more wars and shoot missiles and stuff? Where do you think this is going?
Well, if somebody's smart, they will take a page out of Trump's book and they'll read this study, Dan, just to be frank. There is a tremendous appetite, particularly among veterans, and that extends into families as well, to really reel in what we're doing overseas. And quite frankly, that's the comment by Trump, that is his rhetorical brilliance to boil something down, into its simplest form and put it in terms where he deliberately injects it into the bloodstream. No more stupid wars. Like how does, if you have any questions about what's going on overseas, how can you not identify with that? one of the challenges here in 2024 is kind of the limitation of the Overton window, or the acceptable way that you can debate certain policy decisions. If you looked at I don't know if you watched the Republican debate last night between DeSantis and Haley. um, there was not a whole lot of daylight between them on issues. There's a little bit on Ukraine, but it's really limited right now to, do we fully support Ukraine? It sounded a lot like Nikki Haley was willing to throw boots on the ground, versus, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah, that's a winning deal. Let's get into a war with Russia. I mean, that would be cool. What
Exactly.
the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Be just like Red Dawn. Be just like your favorite Hollywood movie.
Yeah,
Um,
let's don't go there, man.
but the uh the only real guy on the Republican side right now who is an opponent of the Ukraine war to the absolute hilt, and has spoken out against, to a degree, about what's going on in Gaza, is Vivek Ramaswamy, and he wasn't even allowed on the stage. So that
Oh,
leaves
yeah.
a wide open lane for a guy like Trump to step back in and, to continue the rhetoric he had from 2016. Outside of that, I'm not really sure, who could step up on this issue. And I know you sent me a Politico article last week about, making the argument that foreign policy wasn't important to people. When the choice of a different foreign
At
policy
least that's what the foreign policy elite thinks.
right, they'd like it to think, they'd like that to be the case. It's the reality is I look around, and there's nobody who represents my views up there right now. There's people who are close, but you're never going to debate, to that point. If somebody were to pop their head up and take a stand on these things, they could get a tremendous amount of mileage, in my opinion, because people are just waiting to hear it.
So, what do you think is the current situation in terms of where is the electorate, and specifically that same community from 2016, the vet community, their family members? Where are they on these issues right now, and especially in the battleground states? And what impact might it have on the vote, regardless of who is running?
So demographically, there's this really starts to get into the weeds, Dan. You take a look at that area, those areas, particularly around the pivot counties, and then the high casualty counties.
Now, I
Demographic.
know you have a couple of maps, by the way. Just call up anything you want, and Gary will throw it up at any time. By the way, so sorry, keep going.
Yeah, if he pops those up, you'll be able to see them. But like demographically, they are the stereotypical, what you would present in the media is the Trump voter, and right there we have the pivot counties.
And
There's
if you could, what does pivot county mean? Explain that, please.
those are the counties that voted Obama, and then Trump, from 08 through 16, and they're highly rural. They have very high veteran populations, and they were also impacted by casualties, throughout the conflict. They appear to be voting primarily on issues of war. They're not really being spoken to right now. And plus, you just have to start throwing in, all the different pieces of interference within this election. The way that the Biden administration appears to be going after Donald Trump, in a rather different and possibly dangerous fashion. That's really galvanizing people. But
And
I
what
would,
do you mean by that? In a dangerous fashion? In what way?
well, it's the constant prosecution of a guy running for president. That's really unprecedented, in American history. And if they have a valid reason to do it, it's not showing up because every single lawsuit bounces off him like, it's like water off a duck's back.
I see. And so, getting back to that map, Gary, if we
Right.
could pull that back up there, I wanted to go a little bit further in it. Just when you look at the overall number of counties in America, the number seems pretty small. But talk to us about the location of them, because it seems like that they're in some critical battleground states that could, if you're talking about the numbers being equal, kind of up to overall, that could tip something in a direction if the percentages are high enough in favor of one candidate or another. One that's saying, yeah, let's go fight everybody, and the other one saying this no more stupid wars, i.e., if we have another Trump and Biden, rematch, how might this impact in those states?
I think it would. So long as Trump maintains the same rhetoric he's had since 2016, particularly when he's talking about the war in Ukraine. If you look at this map, pardon me, it's you have all of what is essentially the former Rust Belt incorporated in there. It's parts of Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio. Folks who are who have really, helped build this nation and who send their kids off to war. That goes without saying. Um, they are also the people who stand to lose the most should we go hot with a place like Russia. Their sons and daughters are the ones serving. They pay attention to this stuff with a microscope, because for the last 20 years, you basically have, the folks my age who volunteered, early in the 2000s are now have kids, and those kids are next up on the line. It's I think a very strong message, to veterans, or to the people in general through veterans, or empowering veterans to have a say in what's going on overseas, would register immensely. And quite frankly, it's people would do it would do good for a lot of people in power to listen to opinions like yours, Dan. People who have been there, who have done that, who have got the T-shirt, and it's not just a job when you go overseas. You're immersed in the environment. You understand the policy being implemented around you, maybe not with a fine-tooth comb, but you see the impacts. Does it work? Does it not?
Right.
And those are the people who should be pushed up, through government to decide whether or not, our efforts overseas are stupid wars, or if they're benefiting, the American people writ large.
And that message doesn't seem to be getting through. Gary, I'm going to try to throw you another curveball here. If you can pick up that clip we've used a couple of times with Senator Graham talking about blow them off the map. I want to talk about the disconnect between what many politicians, I'm going to pick on him because he makes it so easy, but he's definitely not the only one. There are a lot of people in this category that don't, and I won't say don't seem to, they don't understand the ramifications of their words. And as soon as Gary can pull this up there, I want to get your view on how is these kinds of views received when the people in those red dots you just showed on the map there, when the family members and the veterans see this, especially among a candidate, and especially if somebody for president says something like this, what impact does it have on them when they get ready to vote, do you think? Based on
Without Iran, there are no Houthis. The Houthis are completely backed by Iran. I've been saying for 6 months now, hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map.
Yeah, man, just blow it off the map, because they had no thought to what comes next. No thought to, okay, but if it doesn't blow them off the map and it just hurts them and they start firing back, and then now all of a sudden, all these people in these dots that you showed a second ago, they have to send their sons and daughters over to make good on his threat. Or if it's Nikki Haley, if somehow she got to be president, she's saying a lot of this stuff. Biden, who keeps pushing us right to the edge, it seems a little bit. How are those messages received by the people in those areas you're talking about?
Oh, complete rejection. My first reaction, if I didn't know who Lindsey Graham was and I just heard an audio clip, I would say that guy plays too many video games. Because it seems like a good script for a movie or a video game or something. The folks who have been there, and to get back into who these people are in these different areas, they're generational service members. Their dads went to Vietnam, their granddads went to Korea in World War II, and then you can probably walk it all the way back to prior to the American Revolution in a lot of cases. They understand what this looks like on the ground when it happens. And they understand straight up that, you can try to blow it up off the map, but it needs to be Steve from Des Moines flying that aircraft to drop the bombs. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. And Lindsey Graham and so many of these people, I lump Nikki Haley firmly into this group. They view American success like it's a scoreboard, and a handful of American casualties to take out a target in Iran, it's great. It's a limited interaction, but that's 5 or 6 people, maybe even 1 or 2 people, from one of these towns who don't come back. And then the entire community feels it and they look for a justification. And if you look at our track record, whether it's Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, it's very, very difficult to see the justification for the amount of blood and treasure that we're spilling in these places, and people see it and they want something different, Dan.
Well, I let's certainly hope that they get it, because I remember, especially in the first of the war on terror, shortly after 9/11, when everybody's all in that fervor kind of situation, and when all of our troops started dying in some of these what we certainly came to see as a pointless wars, at first everybody was, holding them up on this huge pedestal. They died for the defense of our country, to help our country out. And, we owe them this great debt, and we're safer because of them. And for a period of time, that's very comforting to someone who's lost a family member, because they want to think that it mattered. They want to think that it meant something. But as time goes on and time continued to pass, these family members can look around and say, we're no safer because of this. Why did my son die? Why did my daughter get killed in that attack? They're not so keen to do that anymore. And now then you're talking decades have passed, and I just think it's fallen on deaf ears. And Jim, I want to ask you, do you think there's also, based on your research, is there a correlation between not just the electoral issue, but also between the way people are voting by not joining the military from some of these same communities? I mean, we're having tens of thousands shortfall in a recruiting that's almost a major issue right now, or is a major issue, that the services are trying hard to find out that they're not even getting enough people to fill the ranks.
Yeah, I don't see how you can separate, one from the other. There's a lot that's happened really in the past 5 or 6 years, but fatigue around the operational tempo in the military has been an issue for probably 15 years. And it's something that you only truly know and truly experience if you've been there. And we're sitting right now with, I believe, like a record low number of elected officials in Congress who are veterans, or just coming out of it. We're near a record low if it's a good day. And there's a huge disconnect between what these policies take to fully implement, and how that impacts someone's entire life on the back end, like yours or mine. In terms of how I like to think about the term as, how do you change this, right? How do you inject veterans into the bloodstream of America? Or people, and I say veterans, it's going to be, people who have dissenting views from, say, Nikki Haley or Lindsey Graham or any number of people in Congress and Senate. I feel almost bad picking on them, continuously. But they
do make it easy.
They do. They deserve it. But it's a whole package. And when it comes to recruitment, and this is going to be part database and part anecdotal, right? My dad was in Vietnam. He was an infantryman. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about how that war was fought, whether it was worth it. Never mattered to me. I was just super proud that my dad, stepped forward and was a Marine. And being a Marine was my goal from the age of like 2 years old. And he never tried to really dissuade me. Now I have 2 daughters. I have a hard time thinking I'd allow them to join the military. It has everything to do with, how our system for overseas projection of force, for war, whatever you want to call it, has just seemingly come off the rails. Anybody who seems to need a bump in polls or wants to look tough during election season, can throw a platoon of Marines in, can throw some ordnance at somebody, for a flash in the pan. And then 30 seconds later, the entire electorate is looking at TikTok or something else, or there's the next crisis. And there's no looking beyond the immediate. It's almost like foreign policy through, instant gratification.
Now, let me ask you this. Now, anybody who's running for office, I'd say like 95, 98% of them, it's a cold calculation of numbers. Okay. Right. Everything I say, everything I do is calculated. How's it going to affect the potential electorate? And I think that it's probably, we got to be honest and say that to a lot of the electorate, you want to sound tough. There's always this get tough on China, get tough on Iran, punch them and hit them, like Haley's famous for saying. And to people who don't have any skin in the game, it sounds cool. Maybe it's like your video game thing you said a second ago. Maybe it's like, yeah, I wanted to be tough on China and boy, put the Iranians in their place, all this kind of stuff without thinking about the potential cost. Whereas the people in the community that you're talking about here, especially all of their extended family members, they're thinking of the potential cost and they're looking backward over a 20-something year wreckage of landscape, right, where all of these tough talks resulted in their family members and friends dying, but it didn't change anything on the ground. Now, the other people, they don't have that 20 years. They kind of do have the 20 years, but it's not personal. So it's not quite as strong there. Right. So I guess my question in all that is, when it comes to the election, it might not matter so much about the people who don't have any skin in that game, because they're probably going to be swayed by 10, 12 other subjects and topics. But those people in those map dots that you showed about there, and others, of course, around it, it could be a big difference. I mean, even in 2016, heading in when everybody thought Hillary would win, you saw that graphic there. It was almost a 20-point advantage for Trump over that. And I would imagine that it's going to be similar for whoever's given that message the next time. So if you were advising any of the presidential candidates from either party right now, what would you tell them how to, if the right word is, thread the needle on saying the things that the people who could tip the balance in this coming election would say?
And Dan, I've done this. I'll share with you, what I've told everybody I've worked for, about this. It's, you have the instant gratification, right, of standing out there and sounding tough on an issue. It sends all kinds of signals to the electorate. You're knowledgeable, you're rough and tumble, you're America. And that initially registers, fairly decently. It doesn't really move you in the negative direction. However, if you take a look at the different candidates going back almost 20 years now, who have dissented from the mainstream narrative about the necessity of engaging in these overseas conflicts, they've done exceptionally well. Case in point, I live outside of Pensacola, Florida right now. Matt Gaetz is my congressman. He is one of the most vocal voices on, limiting U.S. force overseas. Yet we have, the highest density in this congressional district of active duty military personnel in the country. So what does that tell you? It tells you that they understand his perspective and they support it. He's a shoo-in every time, and not just because you're Republican. Ron Paul, it registered. Obama got elected. Trump got elected. And
I see a trend here.
Exactly. It's out there.
We need to get more people I'm talking more people, more candidates to say, hey, this is a winning play here. But the traditional one of ever since George Bush, after 2001, after 9/11, he was, you're either with us or against us. And he was that tough cowboy thing. I think it just kind of inculcated people go, well, that's just what you have to do. But they're not looking at some of the data that you're talking about and the results that some of you're talking about. We need to get more people talking about that kind of thing than about this, tough cowboy thing, which has always had disastrous results for us.
Absolutely. And, one thing in here, Dan, which is much harder to break down, is where the money comes from, right? You have Nikki Haley out there talking her really tough game, right after she came off the board of a major defense company. And,
I'm sure that's coincidental.
Yeah, it was the most natural, place for the UN ambassador to end up was over
defense contractor, of course,
defense contractor making weapons. But yeah, and it's I would really, really hope that someone finds a way to really capitalize on this. But then again, if you look at the individuals who've succeeded, in driving this message, they're largely disconnected from the historical money arc within this country. Donald Trump, he had a largely self-funded campaign. Ron Paul definitely wasn't on the payroll of any defense contractors. Barack Obama was new enough, I believe, and I believe at the time he believed in his message. But if you can think back that election period about how A, America felt about Iraq, but B, it was there was a lot of talk about us tucking our tail and running from Iraq at the time. They really tried to smack me over the head with that. So there's natural pushback, and I believe that the longer that people are ingrained in the system, the more that they defer to the prevailing narrative about the necessity of it to one degree or another, because it keeps them in power and it lines their pocketbooks when they leave. But that being said, we have a tremendous amount of veterans in this country who have a tremendous amount of experience, who are rising to the surface. And I think the best thing that could happen for this country is for those voices to be empowered. They're ideologically.
That's one of the reasons we're having you on here, because we want to empower voices just like yours and many others as it comes in here. And by the way, I know we're running low on time here, and I know you had another map there, and I didn't want to let you go before because I think there was some other aspect of this you wanted to show our audience here.
Okay, so yeah, this is the high casualty map. If you look at The dark red, obviously, and unfortunately, those are your high casualty counties. Going to gray, where there's no, they have no casualties.
When you say casualties, you mean like during the wars that we've had?
Correct.
US
Yeah.
casualties.
Sorry.
Okay.
This is just the global war on terrorism. Pardon me.
Got it.
And if you look at this, what is kind of left out, and I wish I could have blown this up, is the actual breakdown percentage wise. If you were in an urban environment and you joined the military, the casualty rate was 18.6 per million people. If you lived in a rural environment, it was 27.7, or like a smaller secondary city, like a Rolla, Missouri, or a Pensacola, Florida. You're up at upwards of almost 30 casualties per million, which is almost twice what the rest of the country is facing here. And that's pretty stark. It's a very small segment of people. Once again, it's 14% of the overall population taking more than 20% of the casualties.
And how did those counties vote when it came time for the elections?
Oh, they vote against war, very, very, very consistently. If not against war, then they typically vote pretty red, just because of the other demographic makeups. But if you look at the north part of Minnesota, the bright red, that is both a pivot county and a high casualty county. If you look over at all of Maine, those are not only pivot counties, those are high casualty counties. You follow it into Michigan, and I really wish we could blow this up and do an overlay, but the internet doesn't really help you with JPEGs a lot of the time.
Right.
You will see like about 80% of the pivot counties are also high casualty counties. And if they're not directly high casualty counties, they're adjacent. So you have the environment, you have the neighborhood, if you will.
Well, yeah, I guess we're going to see how all this plays out because, I'm grateful for people like you who are highlighting this because, so many times because percentage wise, a lot of those are small percentage of the population,
Right.
but they don't have a voice. And so unfortunately, not many politicians want to pay attention to them because it's a numbers game and they're saying it's a small number. So I'm going to go where the bigger numbers are here. And I'm going to talk tough and all this kind of stuff because it seems to be what or so the thought is, that's what they want to hear. And then all these people who actually serve the country, who actually pay a price, who actually lose family members, especially when they're in these pointless wars that have nothing to do with their national security, they're screaming out there for anyone who will pay attention.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, it is true. It's a numbers game. And if, a certain candidate can get enough numbers, enough votes, then it doesn't matter anything else. But when you're talking about an election that's going to be a razor's edge, these voices can be the deciding factor. And I really hope that our politicians from both parties, frankly, will start paying a little bit more attention, if only because of the electoral benefit it gives them. I would prefer it be for the moral implication to
Absolutely.
take care of our people, which should be the primary driver of every politician. Doesn't seem to be. But right now, I just want to get them taken care of by whatever means.
No, and I completely agree with you, Dan. That should be the primary driver. This first thing you learn in the military is take care of your people. It's the first sign of good leadership.
Indeed, it is.
How are his people faring? But one final thing is the veteran demographic, right? I truly think that this demographic is something that frightens a lot of people in what you would call the establishment, because it's completely like non-linear in terms of how you categorize it. You go back to day one, in the military, what are you doing? You're in basic training, you're in OCS, and they are breaking you down. They are removing your individual identity and you come out as a cohesive unit. Now, do you stay that way the rest of your life? No, but you have a complete underpinning and a unique experience, which is different from everybody else. And that spans, race, sex, creed, gender, your base ideology. And there's a lot that people agree on. And there's a certain perspective that people come out of the military with, particularly on issues of war. That's why, I'm a pretty conservative guy, to understate it a little bit. But at the same time, I've had great conversations with former military members who are avowed communists about, the direction of our foreign policy. We agree on these things, and it's in the interest, I believe, of a lot of people to prevent something from coalescing like that. I just came off of a presidential campaign, which started Democrat went independent. You can do the rest of the math at home if you want. But there was this big push there, right? They brought the Democrat ideal of interest groups, of dividing people up into constituencies and pandering to what they need and what they want. The tricky thing that I advise them on veterans is you really can't do that. There's a certain baseline that veterans want, and it's, don't touch my VA benefits. It's something that's earned. There's a lot of problems with the VA, but hey, this is something that, I paid for with my body over X amount of years, and you're entitled to it. Unlike a lot of things in this country, outside of that, they care about the direction of the country. You have a group of people who signed up and were willing to, if necessary, die on behalf of their fellow citizens. They're willing to pay that price. So they love this country. They want this country to be a better place. And for most of us, it starts with, the reckless involvement overseas, because it impacts everything. It impacts, the price of gas at the pump. It impacts our reputation. If you look at certain things we're backing right now, it's not helping us long term. Right. Every time we were involved in another country, it's another war that our government has to justify to other nations around the planet, and it impacts how my kid is going to be able to have access to capital potentially down the road.
Yeah. And of course it's, I think we're just killing ourselves right now, destroying our credibility among our allies and among our potential adversaries, because no one's taking our word for seriously. And, I think the last time you were on, we were talking about the need for the U.S. to withdraw our troops from Iraq and Syria, because they don't do anything for our national security. They're just pointless risk out there, men and women who could just be with a target on their back, just wondering when one of these strikes is going to get through and potentially kill them for no benefit to our country. And it puts us all at risk. And listen, we're so grateful that you continue to do the work that you do, and to both in the journalistic realm and in the advising realm. Hope that you continue doing that. We want to continue to amplify whatever message you have, because it benefits both the veteran community and the country at large. And so we thank you for all of your service, not just in uniform, but the one you're still doing.
Well, appreciate that, Dan. And likewise, I can't put it any better. Just thank you. And thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks a lot. And so that'll be a wrap for our show today. We remain unintimidated and uncompromised in bringing you all the information you need to make sense out of your world. Stuff you're not getting anywhere else. Information that a lot of people don't want you to know. But we are going to hold our leaders' feet to the fire with the truth and with the things that we need to benefit our entire country. And that's what we're all about here. We thank you. Like and subscribe, share to your friends so that they benefit from this too. And we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.